Well, we're back once again here at RCI TV for another round of the Friday World GT3 Championship. Out in Spain today at a bit of a wet Barcelona Catalunya circuit here this Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening, I suppose, sim time. This was not a whole ton of rain on the radar approaching the weekend for this particular race, but here in the practice session, we do have a little bit of rain. Should very much shake up the competitors' plans for today. George Boothby, of course, our championship leader, P1, P1, P5 across the board. Yaroslav Honzik here in his number 39 Ferrari, previous champion of the series, made himself up some points last week, up in P11. He's going to be hoping for a good finish today to help bring himself up the standings even further. Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Jones, and welcome again to RCI TV. Of course, joining me here in the booth today will be Stewie behind the cameras, as usual. Who else would we have here on a Friday afternoon or evening, depending on where you're at in the world? And again, alongside us with Stewie, who else would we have on a Friday other than Jesse Lee?
Yes, hello, Mike, and everybody out there at RCI TV. We hope that wherever you are, you're having a great Friday evening. And I'm going to open with an anecdote. Mike Jones, what was the probability of rain this weekend here at Barcelona?
Minuscule.
Well, by minuscule, what do you mean by minuscule, Mike Jones?
About as tall as you are, Jesse.
That is absolutely tiny, folks. I can't, it's not that I can't reach the top shelf at the supermarket. I can't reach the second to the top shelf. It is absolutely pouring rain here, track fully wet. And about 5-10 minutes ago, we even still saw drivers out there on the soft, dry tire. But I don't think that's going to be the case anymore, as it has went to full wet. This practice session anyway, started in the dry, and it has progressively gotten more wet. So despite a very, very minuscule chance of rain, it has got to the point now where it is absolutely pouring it down. That's definitely thrown a monkey wrench into these drivers' plans, Mike.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and especially after the situation with Laguna last week, where it was very much supposed to rain and then didn't rain during the actual race times. We saw a lot of rain in between the sessions, and subsequently the track never really got to optimum grip during the remainder of the race. It was, worked its way through green, through fast, and I think it hit optimum there towards the end. But no rain during the actual session, when it very much was forecasted to rain. And here we are this week, full wet in the practice session. Now, of course, qualifying and race here in sim time are on a different day. But as we know with ACC, the weather patterns generally tend to be relatively linear, unless the randomness is cranked all the way up, which it is not in this case. So I'm very curious to see what's going to happen as we transition over to that qualifying session, Jesse. But it very much could throw a wrench into the plans of, say, our championship leader, George Boothby, who, he's in that 720S, and that is not necessarily the absolute best car in the rain. And, of course, his biggest rival, James Parker, after a drop round last week, is back here on the circuit. He was out doing the SRO Monza race, if I'm not mistaken, last weekend. He's in the Audi, and I've got high hopes for Parker's ability to control the car over Boothby in the 720S, possibly. But the Sidemax Motorworks car, that's not going to say he's going to give up, and I still don't expect to see a bad finish out of him by any means. But we can even see just in the practice session here, he's definitely struggling a little bit so far. But who is not struggling is our race-dominating winner from last week, Malinowski, up here at the top of the leaderboard already in the practice session. His Porsche in the rain, Jesse.
Yeah, it was a fantastic win for Malinowski a week ago. And, if it is wet and you have a Porsche, then that seems like a win-win. I know if it gets too wet, I don't think the Porsche likes it that much, but I don't think with the way that RCI races are set up that we could actually get to that point. We have fail-safes in place to keep the track from becoming unraceable, of course, because that's no fun for anybody. But for Malinowski riding high on that win, it was a very long time coming for him. Absolutely elated. We talked to him after the race, and what a fantastic feeling that is. Get that off of your shoulders. You're a winner here at RCI in the top split, and now it's all about focusing on the championship. And today, if this weather persists, could be another fantastic day for the man they call Tortellini, or as Random Call Sign calls him, he calls him Torts.
And Pasta and
No, I call him
Malinowski
Pasta.
and Torts and whatever else we're calling him today is basically what it is. Looks like he's, doing okay with the Porsche so far in the rain is here, Mr. Pasta. Hopefully he won't get boiled out of his pot. Hopefully he won't get boiled out of his pot as we come in. I mean, it is 19C ambient out here as well. That's not necessarily the coolest day for it to be raining as well. I imagine if we were properly out here in Spain, Jesse Lee, we'd be a little moist from humidity. But of course, that is the perk of the sim racing, is we don't have to deal with that quite as much. Get to sit in here in our comfy air conditioning while we race. Not that racing isn't any less sweaty than anything else. I can absolutely confirm after the night owl race last week that I needed to take a shower afterwards, because that Kyalami race was an absolute just non-stop 60 minutes of action. And I went back and rewatched that, of course, with you and Joe Gleason commentating on that one, and it was just fantastic to watch. And I'm hoping for just as good of action here today. And so far, the first 3 races have pretty much provided that, so I don't see any reason why this one shouldn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, Mike Jones talking about the night owl race as Jordan Sohn's getting a little sideways. It's called the Audi Spin Team and living up to the name in the mixed conditions. And he will reset to the pit lane. I reckon Jordan will be done for the practice session. But in reference to what Mike's talking about, if you have not seen the race from last Saturday, go back and watch it. Just watch it. Absolutely insane race coming down to the wire. And I mean, it's just I don't know what it is about RCI races, but all of them seem pretty darn fantastic. And of course, the Monday race was well, let's just say nobody left the booth on the Monday race. Everybody was sitting there with bated breath waiting to see who had won the championship, because even after the race, we weren't quite sure yet, and that wasn't a scoring issue. It was a late race drama issue. So without spoiling anything, go back and take a look at all of that. But in the present, practice wrapping up here at Barcelona. Some people call this they call it Barcelona, some people call it Catalunya. It's all the same area, but either way, I don't think I've ever seen or broadcasted a wet race here at Barcelona, and it'd be interesting to see if this weather does persist, like you say.
Yeah, well, we're going to find out about what the weather might look like for the start of the race here in just a moment. Last of the practice session, going to finish up here. We're seeing the practice there at the top, the max wait time, which means that the practice session is going to tick over here in just a moment. We're going to get into that qualifying. And, of course, the qualifying will lead directly into the race time, so there won't be a massive weather change between the two. We will know what the start of the race is going to look like here in just a few moments. And Jesse, if it is raining, I'm very curious to see what these guys are able to do during the qualifying session, because most of the top laps, of course, that are set here, all of the top laps that are set here in the practice session were done in the initial dry conditions, right? So the question being, do we think that the Porsche can get out and actually get down as quick a laps as he was doing in the dry? Malinowski and subsequently Juan Zemes here, who Juan Zemes, of course, did very well last week as well, coming home P2 with a very dominant finish by him. Malinowski, Juan Zemes, and Massoud pretty much just dominated the top 3 the entire time at Laguna Seca. Fabian Piffet, of course, in his Lexus. The Lexus does very well in the wet generally, so he's done very well so far, finishing P3, and P8 across the first 3 races, which means that we could very well find out if we have the actual wet race, which it looks like we're going to start at least with a wet qualifying. Wet qualifying with descending rain at the top of the race. Oh, man. All right, so here's my prediction for this qualifying session, Jesse. I think that Fabian Piffet is going to be at minimum within the top 3, and I think Parker's going to get a top 5, and Boothby's going to get a top 10.
Well, I got a completely different prediction of you, or for you, of a completely different variety. You are going to have to upload the server config screenshot to confirm that this was meant to be a dry race. There's always a hint of variability in RCI races, and the reason we always bring that up at the top of the show is because it is unpredictable. You don't know, and sometimes even the smallest percentile can hit, and it's just like hitting a jackpot at the casino or something like that. Only in this case, all they won was a wet racetrack when they most likely practiced for a dry one. So, pro drivers, Mike Jones, do you think that they're up to the challenge today? Considering I wouldn't suspect they did a lot of wet weather practice. Do you think that they will be able to cope with this at this stage?
I can't actually confirm. They were chatting in the server chat before they actually got back out on track during the practice session at the top about how none of them had really done a whole lot of wet weather practice here because it just the weather hasn't been on the forecast that much, right? And so now we're here, and of course, Spain has decided to bring it down on us here at the Catalunya circuit. And in the end, I mean, these are, as you say, pro drivers, right? So I don't imagine by any way, shape, or form that they're not going to be able to handle this. But here is our first one, at the very least. Deckers in his NSX is going to lead us around the Catalunya circuit for the first lap of the qualifying session. He gets down into Elf Corner, which is, of course, turn number 1. And you can see just doing pretty well, holding steady, even in that NSX, which, is probably one of these slippier cars in the game, all said and done. This Honda NSX just does not generally do too well in even dry conditions, more or less wet. And you can even see there he is. Now he's slipping, gets on that little bit of a wet line on the inside as he's crossing out and just slips his wheel just a little bit. But good hold by him down onto the apex again. And really keeping this NSX steady. It doesn't look too fast, but something that we can pull from let's say from Top Gear, Jesse Lee, is that it doesn't always have to look fast to be fast, and especially here in the wet, that's really what matters. I mean, you can see how much this guy is turning his wheel. I mean, that's almost a 90-degree kick that he's doing there onto that right-hander before he comes out on the back straight. And this is probably the hardest braking zone besides for turn 1. Got to get that car all the way down to first gear and through that left-hander, which is a very difficult corner, even in the dry. And this Honda is handling it really well. Decker's really showing that, he's got the ability to come out here and do these laps in the wet, even despite not planning for it initially. Through the chicane, a little bit of a twitch there over to the left-right, and then comes through the final corner. And we're going to see what this first lap will be. The gauntlet is going to be thrown down. Again, didn't look too fast, but what will it be? I'm going to say a high 40 maybe. No, he's at a 50.1. So just over that 40 mark there, Jesse Lee. Immediately beaten by Bouquet, but only by a tenth and a half. So, you can see about where these times are probably going to be. Just a solid lap by Deckers, even if it didn't look amazingly fast.
Solid is going to be something that everybody here is going to be striving for today, as Mikhail Sunstrom's coming through an area of great trouble, what I call the moto chicane, as of course there's a car stranded on the inside island there, staying safe and out of the way. Mikhail Sunstrom, for nearly on pace, will appreciate that. As they come to the line, I think we're going to get a clearer picture of what everyone's capable of, and that a 50.751. Not quite what they would have wanted. George Boothby for Sidemax Motorworks goes provisional pole with a 49.779, 1.5 tenths over Albin Bouquet. James Parker 3/10 behind. The time's very close. I think that's right around where we are going to be, though I suspect there will be a bit of improvement here in about 5 or 6 minutes time as the track conditions improve a little bit.
Yeah, we're going to see if the track conditions do improve by the end of qualifying or not, because of course we do have that lessened rain, as we continue through. But I don't think it's going to get down into a damp situation by any means. So I think at best all we're going to see is maybe a little bit faster of a racing line. But Malinowski coming off with the 48.9. Great lap by him, and Boothby also out here, of course, proving me a little bit wrong out here in the P2 position. He took over from Bouquet ever so briefly, but Malinowski just an absolute dominating lap so far. He's almost a full second ahead until Jaroslav Honzik puts it on the board with about 5.5 tenths back. So it's interesting. This is going to be such a tell of cars, I think, at this point, Jesse. And Stewie was just talking about a little bit earlier, because obviously his car of choice is the Porsche, and he was saying how quick the Porsche can be if you can drive it in the rain. It is a damn good car. However, what I'm seeing here on my timing board, Boothby's about a second up, and there he goes across the line. Boothby throwing down the 48.822, taking over that P1 position from Malinowski. So maybe he's just going to prove me wrong as well, and the 720S is going to come out here and just pop off.
That's an incredible time, a 48.822. I don't think we're done quite yet as Cody Pride comes to the line and improves a 49.740. But yeah, Boothby, that was a heck of a lap, and it had to be to overtake Malinowski, who had set the first 48 down. And there you have it. Two drivers in the 48th. What does Jordan Solnes have? And it's looking like only a 51.21. As some of the times, some of the cars struggling here a little bit, but others are finding their pace.
And you can see the racing line definitely has developed a little bit since the start of the session, which isn't surprising. So, I think that we're going to see these times continue to tumble down just a little bit, but I don't think they're going to get too much quicker at this point than Boothby just put down, just like we just spoke about, of course. But I don't know. What do you think, Jesse? Maybe mid 48s by the end of this, maybe, depending on if these guys can keep their tire pressures or not, will really be the question. There's Jardier across the line again, picked up a little bit of time, edging closer and closer to Boothby. I know Jardier, he's good in the rain, is that man, and the Ferrari does pretty well in the rain as well. So I'm hopeful that he can come out here and put a good showing down. He needs to get out here and fight for his championship or defend his championship position from last season rather. He's really got to bring the fight to Boothby this week if he wants to solidify himself as a competitor for the actual championship lead. Deckers, here he is across the line again, picking up quite a bit of time as him, all the way up into P5, only 5 tenths back from the lead, and he's going to go ahead and spin himself out as he comes across the line right in front of Piffet, I think that is.
You gotta be careful doing that. That's all fun and games, but stewards will not appreciate it if you impede somebody else's lap or create a track hazard. But all fun and games, Decker having fun in the rain, and certainly one of the few that probably will be having fun in the rain today, I would have to argue. But I think we have 3 or 4 drivers down into the 48s. And to your question, Mike Jones, I think 48.5 is very doable here. I think at least one driver will get down into that sort of time range, maybe 2, as they're all, what they say, rain's a great equalizer, and we are seeing that on the top of the timing sheet right about now.
It's very interesting. I was not expecting the McLaren to be all the way up there and on top like that, but a good showing by him so far. It's always an interesting qualifying session, I think, Jesse, when it's in the rain, because of, like you said, it is the equalizer in the end, right? And so all of these drivers, they're not out here prepared for a wet race this week, and now all of a sudden they've got this wet conditions, and they've got to make sure that they're out here trying to do the best that they can just with their own driver skill. versus perhaps a setup in practice out here at Barcelona. And I was trying to think back as well if I've seen a race in the rain here at Barcelona, because you mentioned that you have it, and I don't think I have either. Come to think of it, so this is a new one for us completely as well here at the Catalunya circuit, with it being in the rain. Malinowski, though, he's flirting with that P1 position through Sector 1, so he's 2/10 up on his lap. And so this Porsche even is looking very, very strong. We're seeing 6, 7, 8. Actually, whoa, God, I got to keep going down to P13 before I even find a front-engine car on the grid. So these mid-engine cars are really doing well. Piffitt's struggling a little bit. I'm a bit surprised in the Lexus. Perhaps he was very much not prepared for the rain in the Lexus, because obviously we know the Lexus does very, very well in the wet. But Piffitt's struggling a little bit, and maybe that will be indicative of what's going to happen in the race, and maybe Piffett is going to suffer his first big loss of the season if he's not careful. He's still a second back off of Boothby. Pride just took over the P2 position, though. Only a 10th back off of Boothby, but Boothby holding it so far. Malinowski wants it. He's still 2/10 up, and that is within range to get himself up onto the first position if he can hold it through the remainder of the lap, and he is approaching the final chicane now.
Well, Malinowski coming to the line. I'm not entirely sure that this is going to get him back up to the pole position, but coming around the final turn here, coming down to the line, fourth right now, needs an improvement. Actually, he is going to. He picked up several tenths in the final chicane. Did Malinowski, a 48.720, the current mark to beat over George Boothby. Cody Pride third, Jardier fourth, and Kovacs in fifth place. All around 3/10 from one another, getting very spicy here at the sharp end of qualifying. 3 minutes to go. One last chance, Mike Jones, to set that lap, and it is going to be a very wild ride. You have to hang on out there.
Well, Boothby 2/10 up so far as he's crossing in through the final sector. Going to make the right-hander and then into the chicane. He doesn't need to pick up a whole ton of time to cross the line and get back up into that pole position. And he is gaining time, and now it looks like he just lost a little bit. You can see him wiggle all through the last corner. He's losing time. I don't think this is going to be enough. It's very close. It is not quite enough. He picks up a half a tenth, but he's got time for 2 more laps. Depending on what type of fuel he's got, he might be able to pick up a little bit more time. Malinowski is not up on his current lap. Bouquet may have just invalidated his coming out of the final corner and did not pick up any time. Massoud, though, in his number 100 Porsche for the H3 Racing Team, up into P5. So a good job by these Porsches up at the top of the grid to really hammer down the last couple minutes of the qualifying session here. Here's, of course, our P2 from last week, Juan Zemes. And we're going to catch a bit of a replay here from Roth. Let's see.
Oh,
baby!
Man. Oh, my goodness. A big off.
That looked like a Bentley out in the middle of the road. I think that is from this distance, and he just had nowhere to go. And that is how dangerous it can be, even here in the open area that is Barcelona. If you are not careful, you can come around a blind corner and find yourself a big boy laying in the middle of the roadway, and that will cause all sorts of trouble. Luckily, this is what sim racing is for, Jesse Lee.
You ruined me with the big boy, but Werner Decker's coming around the final chicane and into the final turn here, looking for a pickup. Remember, Decker's was provisional pole here just a little bit ago, about a second off of the pace was he at the time. He's improved since then, but what does he have? He has enough pace for third place right now. 48.8 at George Boothby's coming around to the line, and oh Lord, he a coming. What is it going to be? It's going to be pole for George Boothby right now. 48,
yeah, not surprising after his.
Not
surprising after his last lap. I mean, he was really pushed on that last lap. He was a few tenths up coming into the final chicane, and then we just saw like how bad his grip was towards the end of the that lap, like coming in through the final corner. which is where he lost all of his time. And then I'm watching him right now. He's another 10th up, by the way, Jesse Lee, as he's making his way through Sector 1. Malinowski's a few tenths up as well, though. I don't think this is going to be enough for him to get up back into P1, but he's trying hard. He's about three tenths up as he comes out of the chicane, but did not get a good enough run coming onto the start-finish straight. It's only going to be about a tenth of gain, and that is going to be the end for him. Back into P2 is Malinowski. I don't think anyone at this point is going to make up enough time. Maybe Cody Pride, as he's got a couple tenths on his lap, but he's coming through Sector 1 at the moment, so he's got a long way to go before we're going to find out if he's going to be able to. Joe McCauley picks up a little bit of time on his final lap, up into P12. So, a reasonable spot for that Lamborghini to be, as we know the Lamborghini to just not be a great car in the wet, all said and done. But Joe McCauley holding onto it so far and seeing if he can keep it steady and make his way up near the top 10. James Parker, about a 10th up. This will be a couple positions for him. He's in 9th, and it looks like that was an invalidated lap by him possibly, and he will not gain any further positions in his Audi R8. Bouquet, P18. Again, a couple tenths up here towards the back, or towards the middle of the field, trying to follow this Lamborghini through. That might impede him a little bit, or it might give him a little bit of slipstream. We don't really know. Is he able to come across the line? He's 4 tenths up, and it is all the way up into P10 at the final moments. Albin Bouquet, great job by him. The newcomer, Martin Grady, out here, the 418 Bentley, back through the middle of the field. He's going to put down his final time, and it looks like Grady is going to come across finally in P22. All said and done, Cody Pride not able to pick up any time, and Jesse Lee, we are out on the grid, and well, of course it is wet, but still decreasing rain. We're going to be seeing light rain in probably about 20 minutes or so, and this is going to be an interesting one. All these guys, of course, do have to pit once regardless, but this means that we're going to have to get at least one full tire stop during this race, because I'm imagining it's going to be going dry towards the end and or even the middle of the race, and it's going to make it very strategy based here at Barcelona.
Yes, indeed. Well, here we are with the championship points. Just to remind you of where everybody is in the Pro Championship. Of course, this is the top split here of the Friday GT World Championship. This is the halfway point in the season, and George Boothby, who dominated so much of the early part of the season, has a nice points lead over Fabian Piffet, 181 to 144. James Parker in third, 116. Albin Bouquet, 110. And this is where it all gets very close. Chris Juan Zimis in fifth place has 106 points. Milton Stilvassen, 100. Malinowski, who won last time out with 99, jumped them all the way up into the seventh place position. Alexander Karsten, eighth with 96. Massoud in ninth place with 87, and Martin Grady with 85 is your top 10. And these drivers here are all looking for a bit of a rebound. And speaking of a driver that is on a rebound, Jaroslav Hanzik in number 11th place in the 39 with 78 points. Had a dismal opening couple of rounds, but has recently found a bit of a reprieve. Mikhail Sunstrom looking for that same relief. Leone, Pride, Dordels, Vanbrugh, Dadigny, Harbino, McCauley, and Kalat, the top 20. And these are the drivers who have, well, to be fair, struggled just a bit. Willamont, Lawrence, Marquardt, Samard, who's not been here for every round, Waz, Anafreev, Hooley, Thomas, Soldatov, and Jose Jorge's in the top 30. And even beyond these drivers, these are the drivers that haven't taken part in the majority of the races. Dorschel, Rambach, Deckers, Keebel-Roth, Yimaz, Kovacs, Ginner, Solons, and Sky. And here we have even more so King, Santos, Belisane, Mironov, Santamato, and Favre, as we're going to call it. I actually don't know how to pronounce Steve's name. I think it actually might be Favre. But either way, some of those drivers not taking part in the full championship, busy elsewhere. Well, that is how the championship points lines up. Today, an absolute curveball. Just a reset for you here. Barcelona today was not really supposed to be a wet race. A minuscule chance of rain here has led to a wet practice, wet qualifying, and a wet race, though we do suspect, according to the weather report, it is going to get better at some point. It is going to be a wet start. Mike Jones, what are the keys to starting this race in the rain now?
Oh, yeah, that's going to be the thing, right? So at the very least, it isn't damp, right? It is wet. It is in that kind of light medium rain section. So we know that at the very least, these guys should have enough grip to get their tires up to pressure before we start getting into that damp track, into those extremely slick conditions that are kind of that in-between spot between the wet and the dry, right? So we know that these guys are the pro drivers. They're going to need to just sort themselves out by the time that they get in through turn 4, because that is probably going to be the most difficult corner there to still be racing side by side. We know that they're going to be side by side in through Elf and Renault. Why wouldn't they be, right? But by the time you get down to Rest Bowl and Seat down in turn 4, turn 5, if you catch those two right and then subsequently left-hand switchbacks, and they aren't sorted out single file, things could get messy off the racing line, because in the end, these guys' tires aren't fully up to pressure. They're going to get more confident once they're 30, 45 seconds into the race a little bit rather than off the launch. And we're going to figure out, who is going to be the wet race champion here in the end. We've only got maybe about 30 minutes of rain, give or take, throughout this race. So if you're going to get out and dominate early, the only thing you really have to do is come in and pit, right? Because all of these guys are going to be relatively equal in dry for the most part. So the key to this race is going to be to within the first 30 minutes, get yourself a gap, get yourself out in front, and then you can just keep it, because in the end, once you get comfortable in the rain, it should be fine. Boothby, Malinowski, Deckers, and Honzik, of course, in the first 2 rows, are really going to have the best chances at it. But in the end, it's going to be interesting to see what all goes on. We do see Giner, perhaps, that has gotten teleported back to the pits as well, Jesse Lee, in the number 7. Stewie showing us that empty spot on the grid. So somebody starting from the pit lane today.
Well, obviously, I don't think they meant to do that, as we do have the 007 Bentley here in the pit lane. I don't think they meant to do that, but it's not a bad call, to be fair. You're starting in the wet. You're starting near the back. Might as well put yourself in a safe position. Everybody knows what they have at this point. Hopefully, they were very quickly able to bring a wet weather setup from a previous race or experience here. Undoubtedly so. All these pro drivers will have been able to draw on past experience, but it still is sort of shocking. You prepare all week for a dry race, and then the 0.1% of the time where it could be wet comes up, and then all of a sudden you have to scramble. Some teams, some drivers will be more used to this than others, and they will respond better than others. But back to the Bentley in the pit lane, I don't hate that. I wouldn't mind that myself too much. It's going to keep him out of trouble here on the initial start. And who knows, when this weather dries up, they could be the ones in the driver's seat to get a bunch of those positions back. Wet start confirmed. Every car will undoubtedly be on the wet weather tire. We expect in the next 25 minutes the weather to grant us some sort of reprieve. And I would imagine, Mike, we're going to have a fairly dry into this race. This race, just a 60-minute race with a pit stop required in the middle somewhere, pit stop timer. And, of course, this race, just like all of our Friday championship races, live stewarded by the live stewarding team. So thank them for being with us as well. Mike Jones, Jesse Lee, and Stewie bringing you the action from today. And, Mike, probably the most important start that they have done all season to this point.
Yeah, I totally agree. We know where the championship points have kind of like stood out at this point, right? Throughout the first three races. So these guys at this point are knowing where they're at in the championship. They know what they need to do, and they know where they need to be at here at the end of the race to really get themselves up into that position for the rest of the championship. This is an 8-race championship in the end. They've got so much time to really make up the time in it, right? So this is race 4 of 8. Boothby, of course, is going to lead the field down into the start-finish straight for race number 4, and he is, of course, the championship leader. The question being, in 60 minutes, will he still be up at the top of the field, approaching the green flag line? Here they go. The green flag is in the air, and Malinowski gets a great jump off the line. He is not going to be able to clear Boothby, I don't think, by the time they come down into Elf and then subsequently the Renault, but he is going to push him all the way down. You can see the Honda in the background of Decker's there all the way to the left side of the track, trying to cut off Malinowski from cutting back across, maybe pushing him through by a couple of the cars off on the other side. Doesn't look like there's too much off there, but there's about 3 cars that have gotten caught up into turn 1. The rest of the field up at the front has more or less sorted themselves out in 1, 2, 3, 4 file all the way down through about P8, and that is Malinowski jumping ahead of Boothby off an excellent start by him as they come down into turn number 4 and out to turn number 5 and onto the back straight here very shortly. We're going to see the Porsche try and make his way around Deckers. That is the Porsche Massoud pushing all the way around, but he is not able to get the run off the back end of it, and he's going to cycle back out in front of Cody Pride. Honzik just following these guys, waiting for that opportunity to pounce. He knows that it's the wet conditions. He's trying not to push too wide possibly here early on in the race. Let these Porsches sort themselves out, and these guys are coming out onto the back straight. Stewie, let's take a look at that turn 1 if we have it and figure out what the hell went on with that.
Well, I can tell you that it was a car that I think went on the inside grass, Mike Jones, or maybe just outbroke themselves. We're going to see it here. They're 3 and 4 wide here in the background. And yes, indeed,
yep.
my eyes did not fail me. A car off into the dirt. You can't brake there, and it's just cannonball and a bunch of cars collected.
That was Piffett, Joe McCauley, and collected James Parker.
Huge championship implications there, and meanwhile we go back to live images and it's not going to be any better. 3 wide through a tight corner. It's going to be contact and a spinning car off there, and that's going to be further damage. And thank goodness for stewarding, because they now have a mess that they have to sort out as some early cars into the pit lane here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely going to see plenty of cars into the pit lane after that. Plenty of damage that's going to need repairing there. Unfortunate for them, because it means they're likely going to have to make a second pit stop with tires later on in the race. That is the downside of the changeable conditions here within any sort of racing. But that said, there are enough cars that got damaged out there that, you know, they should be fighting for something near the end of this race. Of course, here's one more replay. We're going to watch from Mikhail Sunstrom's point of view here. There's a Porsche out beneath him. Looks like just a little bit of a tap. Sunstrom gets tapped around and tapped back. That's Martin Grady there with them as well. And that Porsche looks like he's deciding to take off a little bit. I think that was the Porsche Favre, who has indeed dropped back behind Grady at this point, as we can see on the leaderboard. And here's one more look at the contact with Piffett down into the chicane. Looks like he barely taps the Honda, slows up just a little bit, and the Ferrari made a huge dive onto the inside, and that's what spun him around. I'm going to call fault Ferrari possibly on that one, Jesse Lee, for that one. Obviously, I think Piffett probably caused the turn 1 incident in the end. We'll have to see what the stewards think of it, but I don't think that I can fault him too much for that one, getting dove on the inside into that chicane.
Yeah, no, racing's about picking your moments, Mike Jones, and I just felt like that wasn't the moment for that particular Ferrari, which is actually, is that Santos perhaps? I think that might be Santos. I just don't think that was the right moment to dive down the inside like that, make it 3 wide. It's very tricky conditions. It's changing conditions, and there we have it, folks, confirmed. 30 minutes from now, the rain is going to go away. And Justin Hooley spinning around offline there. Oh, and that will happen. If you get offline in ACC, get the greasy, less ran in line, and then all of a sudden, your grip that you previously had disappears. But yeah, I just feel like the start here, Mike, is a lot of drivers way over eager in the wet conditions and getting ahead of themselves and causing complete chaos. And don't forget the championship implications of a couple of those cars that were taken out in turn one. We're going to have to pay attention to how much they can all recover, because that was not good, especially for Fabian Piffet and them. And we'll have to pay attention to see just how far up the field they can get. Meanwhile, Jardier under attack here for Juan Zimis. Juan Zimis did not get qualify exactly where he would have wanted to have been, but Jardier doesn't want Juan Zimis to climb the ranks at his expense. But that is indeed what's going to happen here. Is there's going to be a overtake or
Yeah, well, he is in a sandwich of Porsches, to say the least there, Jesse Lee. So here is Massoud up here in P3, one of the other Porsches. We have Porsche 1, 3, 5, and 7 so far in this race. Malinowski has definitely gotten that jump off of Boothby, of course, on the line, and he's not too far ahead of him. Is Malinowski up at the front? Boothby still fighting for it. We're going to catch a bit of a replay with Ambra here, back near the middle of the field. I think there's just a little bit of a touch here, perhaps onto the Ferrari, and not a whole lot more there. But in the end, the Ferrari just given a little bit of a slide, is Bella saying. I did notice James Parker in the pit lane, still in the pit lane. I think he has perhaps retired the car, unfortunately, after that turn one contact. Joe McCauley sent around and just spiraled into James Parker. And there he is. There goes Cody Pride. I believe that one was no, that was Juan Zimis. So Juan Zimis gets thrown off the circuit. We're seeing him tap into the back of Jardier coming into turn one, throws himself up off the circuit. Jardier just kind of takes a little bit of the escape road out, cycles back out on the track, but Juan Zimis falls quite a bit of positions after that tap. And Cody Pride and Honzik now going to get a little bit more free air away from Juan Zimis, who, of course, was so fast last week. They're not going to be too sad about him getting sent off the track in the end, because that gives them a little bit less work to do. And it's so important to just keep yourself on the track, guys. We did just see the rain tick off the forecast there in 30 minutes. That means the back half of this race is going to be in the dry, and we're going to need to make that tire stop and subsequent dry finish to the race. These guys just need to keep themselves clean for the remainder of the 20-25 minutes or so, as we're going to see the lines continuing to dry out. I mean, at this point, Jesse, it hardly looks like the track is very wet, through this, and you're seeing the wetness on the outside line a little bit, but we're going to see that continuing to dry out and out and out over the next 15 to 20 minutes or so before it finally gets into those damp and greasy conditions. And that's really when the grip levels are gonna be struggling for most of these cars, because they're still going to be on wet tires and needing to stretch those wet tires as much as possible before they can get on the dries. As we know, these the Pirelli dry tires just don't do too well. We can already see these guys dipping into the wet line here, having overpressure tires, needing to cool their tires down a little bit, and that's really going to make them struggle. A little bit of a contact there, Hooley onto the back of Giner. No incident there necessarily, but it looks like a little bit of a contact onto the back of the Bentley. Good hold by Giner to make sure that he comes out after starting in the pit lane, made up those positions, just keeping it clean. Perhaps the pit lane was the correct start there, Jesse.
Yeah, I don't think it was the correct start, but I don't think it was a death sentence either, is what I was conveying at the start. And case in point, Giner would have been in the middle of some of that melee in turn one, but found themselves far enough behind they were able to pick their way through, gained a bunch of spots already, has the 007 Bentley, so going well indeed for them. Alvin Bouquet for Esports Performance here, trying to get by Cody Pride. Cody Pride appears to be ailing just a little bit in these conditions, but also does Malinowski. Malinowski only has a 7/10 of a second lead over George Boothby for the overall lead, and I wonder if that is down to the conditions of the racetrack at this time, and maybe the Porsche not as confident or not as agile in these conditions as some of the other cars, because certainly didn't look like some of the Audis were as good in the full wet. But now that it is a mixed condition, Alvin Bouquet is now looking a bit more racy.
Yeah, unfortunately, we won't see the Audi of the 889 out here towards the top of the field to fight because, of course, again, as Stewie showed us very briefly, James Parker did have to park his car after massive damage for the incident in lap 1. Put a huge damper on his championship run. He used his drop round last week, of course, and now he's going to finish at the bottom of the field today as well, with 0 points here in the end. But his Audi partner, Albin Bouquet, out on track fighting for those positions. I think you're right, Jesse Lee. I think that Bouquet is definitely looking a little quicker here as we get into the lower rain conditions. Of course, at the top of the field, Boothby still chasing Malinowski. That gap is holding pretty steady between them, but they have gapped Massoud by a couple seconds up towards the top, and there's a few seconds between P3, 4, and Honzik back in 5th position as well. So these guys kind of sorting out into their own battles now that we're about 10 minutes into this race. Vanbrugh here at the tail end of this pack of cars that are fighting for what is P5 in the end. You can see out in the distance there, that is Jardier leading this small pack of cars along the track, and Cody Pride behind him, and of course Bouquet, Mark Vett, Thomas, Bellasane, and then Vanbrugh here. And this pack is going to be a very interesting one to watch because we have all mid-engine cars besides for Thomas there. So I'm very curious to see how that Aston does in comparison as we kind of get into the drier part of the race.
Well, the track's going to go through a change, and the cars are going to go for a change all of a sudden. Oh, and looks like Yannick Rambach has had an issue. Was it contact related? Starting to think it might have been down the... Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's exactly what happened with Fabian Piffet to start with. Braking on the wet curb can get you into trouble, and it did there, and unfortunately took out another competitor as well.
Here's a bit of a move there from Albin Bouquet. Absolutely just sprinting past Cody Pride on the outside of Elf Corner. See ya, sir. And you are now in P7, Cody Pride. The Porsche factory driver, number 33, is just absolutely decimated by the Audi down the front straight. And now Bouquet is going to want to go chase down Honzik. Pride isn't done with Bouquet, though. Look at this. Sticking his nose up on the inside, coming out of turn 4 and into turn 5. It's not quite enough into C corner. Bouquet does have the inside line, is able to get on the hammers just a little bit sooner coming out of the corner. And that's going to get him right back out in front of Pride for the moment. But these guys are really pushing hard at this point, just abusing every last bit of grip that they can before they start running out of it on these wet tires. I've been peeking, by the way, at the car in front of Bouquet here, Yaroslav Honzik. His tires are about literally as perfect as they can be at the moment. Great temperatures. Pressures are about perfect, sitting at the high 29s, just below that 30 mark, right where you want them at. So Yaroslav Honzik is very happy with his car at the moment, I'm sure, and he's going to make sure that he's able to keep that thing steady until he gets out onto the dry tires. That should help him defend from Albin if it comes down to it and Cody Pride lets him. Because in the end, I think at this point, Jesse Lee, it's going to be more of a situation, does Cody Pride let Bouquet fight Honzik, or does Cody Pride just stay side by side with him all lap long?
Yes, indeed. I mean, it's a decision that everything you do in a race like this is decisions. And for some, they've already made their bed, and it wasn't a very good made bed. It was very messy. But can I just say, that move that Bouquet made on Cody Pride, give that man some hand sanitizer, because that move was absolutely clean. I gave him no chance of being able to make that move. And once again, we go to the 199. What's happened this time? Oh, yeah. So there was an overtake there in the background. And for a couple of these teams now, Mike Jones, I've just got to ask, perhaps your race hasn't started very well in the wet conditions. What do you do to keep yourself motivated? I assume you got to tell yourself it's going to dry up, and it's going to be okay.
I mean, that's pretty much it, right? I mean, that's what you do as a driver. You don't, especially with the drivers at these levels, right? Like, unless you're wrecked out by critical damage or something, like the 889 was to James Parker, he had over a minute worth of damage. It was hardly worth it for him to come back out on the track, being an entire lap down, and pretty much the only one that was that far of a lap down, right? So in the end, it's something that you've just got to realize that you may not have had the best start, but regardless of what happens in a championship, points are points. It doesn't matter if it's 5 points. It doesn't matter if it's 30, right? Because in the end, points are points in such a long series like this, and you have to keep it steady and go through the remainder of the race. Speaking of which, I was just noticing speaking of people who didn't have a good start, let's talk about somebody who has had a great start. Car number 418 up in P14 at the moment. Martin Grady has made himself up. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he started in P22. I'm going to have to go back and check on that really quick, but he's made up an absolute ton of time, has Martin Grady. He did indeed start in P22, so he's made up 8 positions, Jesse Lee. A fantastic shot by him so far, as we see our first penalty come out, and a very unsurprising penalty at that. This is Bouquet, by the way, coming across Honzik through the inside of Elf Corner. He made it work on the outside, and then he made it work on the inside as well. And this Audi, Jesse Lee, you've hit it on the head. This Audi is doing so well in these lesser rain conditions. None of these guys have any sort of shot for Bouquet at the moment, but I did see the penalty come out, and an unsurprising one by any means, I think. Fabian Piffet with a stop-go 10 for the initial contact that caused the race-ending damage for James Parker and the massive damage for Joe McCauley as well there at the start of the race. And, well, I don't know about you, but it's not surprising for me.
No, it's not. And if you're wondering why it was a stop-go 10, not only did it take out multiple cars, it's on the opening lap. RCI stewards have a very simple formula to follow. If an accident happens on the first lap where you should be a bit more cautious, then that is going to be a worse penalty. And added to the fact that it was multiple cars involved in the incident, I feel like they almost got off lucky there a little bit, Mike Jones, that it was only a stop-go 10 and not something more severe. I have seen them pull out a more severe penalty for a multi-car collateral at the beginning of a race. Monza comes to mind, where they almost parked a car for a similar incident, though, of course, I think that the penalty does fit the crime in this case. A stop-go 10 warranted. Serve it, move on, understand that it was a mistake, and we've already seen it happen again. That will surely end up in a penalty as well. Trying to stop on a curb, that's all that was, folks. There was nothing meant by Fabian Piffet there. It was just trying to get everything you can on the initial start of the race, trying to brake on a very wet curb. The traction difference between the curb, the painted section, and the racetrack completely different. And that's going to pull you back onto the racing surface where you have more grip, into another car, collision, penalty given. And well, I don't assume he'll argue with that. Well, Fabian Piffet, I don't really think you can. Meanwhile, up front, George Boothby, who qualified on pole and subsequently lost the lead to Malinowski. Well, that gap is now coming back down. George Boothby closing in a big way now.
Actually, this has been relatively steady and fluctuating between about 4/10 to 8/10, more or less, between these two, pretty much the entire 18 minutes of this race. And Boothby, he's getting good through certain sections, but I'm really curious to see, as this, obviously we can see how dry that track looks down there from this bumper cam at this point. What will happen once this dries out? Will Boothby be able to put on the hammers and get this thing past Malinowski, or will he struggle for the remainder of the race against him, fighting tooth and nail every which way that it goes? There is a little bit of a time loss there, and that's why this keeps slingshotting back and forth, is he's just trying so hard, I think, to get past him. I'm wondering if he thinks he's got more pace in the wet versus the dry, Jesse, and that's why he's trying to push just so hard. And you can see how much he's sucking up here through the straight. That's really what Malinowski, of course, is going to struggle with, especially once it gets out to the dry. That Porsche just not great in a straight line. And, so if Boothby can come out of that final corner and get that slipstream on him and slingshot past into turn one, that might cost Malinowski the lead in the dry. But he's been so quick through the remainder of the lap that he may be able to fight it back. It's I just nothing we can say at this point is going to know for sure. This is all theory, as the track just did switch over to that damp section. That means that these pit stops are probably going to be coming up here, and I would imagine 15 minutes or so as the track continues to dry. But I don't even know what to think, Jesse, because in the end, every time we try to predict something in these changing conditions, it seems to go the exact opposite, right?
Well, we tried to predict the weather, and we got that wrong, Mike, as Juan Zimis here going to get it a little wrong there. It's going to get overtaken for the 13th place position, but we can't even get the weather right. What makes you think we could get the strategy right? But this is the race I wanted to see. I wanted to see Malinowski and Boothby. It may not come down to the two of them in the championship at the end of the season, or it may do. We don't know, but one way or another, that's the race I wanted to see. We're going to get to see it here today. A little bit of weather drama, tire strategy, and a little bit of a touch there. Yimaz, a little bit of a bump. No real harm, no foul, though that will cause just a little bit of damage. Herbino in the 148, right in the middle of this field, trying to make up a position here on Geiner, it looks like. Doesn't look like that's going to happen that time by. Meanwhile, down the front straightaway, the draft absolutely working as Boothby continues to close in on Malinowski, just filling up every mirror that the 992 Porsche has. And just look at the hands. Look at the hands of George Boothby as he's wrangling this car, changing conditions, slippery out there, and now perhaps just a bit greasy, or indeed it will be greasy here in just a little while as well. But Boothby, very calm and collected, not a man that makes a lot of mistakes, Mike Jones is Boothby. He's very methodical about his process, and we've seen him spend 40 minutes behind a guy waiting for the correct time to pass.
Yeah, and we're going to see Bouquet here. A little bit of a replay from him just fighting against Pride and Honzik there. You can see just these guys getting a bit of the replay of them just fighting back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Pride and Bouquet and Honzik, they're still stacked up. So Honzik did get back past Bouquet eventually in the end. But again, we've seen Bouquet be so strong through the last 15 minutes or so. And I'm curious to see what will happen, of course, as we get into the drier conditions. But in the end, Jesse, I'm looking back at Nürburgring as the perfect example of George Boothby. How long did he sit in P2? It was basically the entire
forever.
race.
Yeah, just forever.
Then still came across at the top.
He spent the entire race in second place, for those of you that weren't with us. 1 minute to go, takes the lead. Very patient is George Boothby, and that's exactly what we're seeing out of him now. And Malinowski, I don't think, would be too angry about Boothby being behind him, because at least Malinowski can control the race, though it is slipping away just a little bit as Boothby takes a look down the outside, and he's going to be given the outside by Malinowski now. I don't think any move here will come off, but either way, the intent being shown, Boothby letting Malinowski know, I am not afraid to go off the racing line and make this pass. An intent shown and definitely noted by the driver of the 992. Excellent duel here as we approach halfway, and nobody wants to come into the pit lane right now, I would reckon, because your tires are going to be more effective if you can last another 10 minutes in these conditions. Your dry tires, first of all, it's not time for dries, I don't think, quite yet. But if you can wait another 10 minutes, that would be just about perfect. In a weird way, this weather has sort of forced the strategy of a lot of these teams. But as somebody in chat said earlier, it's all about the timing. And you're very right about that. Timing is everything. How many times have we seen a race here on RCI TV be changed or dictated by the exact moment somebody makes a pit stop, and George Boothby getting as close as you like to the back of Malinowski. That was very good driving.
Yeah, the problem is it cost him at the end of the corner, unfortunately, and what he needs is he needs the run off the final corner I mean, you can see him, of course, get all the way up here. That Porsche just got no legs down the straight. And actually,
oh, wow.
Never mind.
Wow.
Never mind. I'm just gonna. Okay.
Wow.
Well, Boothby's in first now, in case anybody missed that. Just absolutely clears the 992 down the straight before they even get to the corner. And you know, in the end, it's just ridiculous how slow that Porsche is down the straight and how much of a struggle we can really see that Porsche will have. But here's where the true test comes in, right? Because in the end, Malinowski has shown so much speed through the rest of the circuit so far. Is he going to be able to get up to the side of Boothby coming out of a corner or something like that and get himself up? We can see that Boothby not diving into that wet line as much as Malinowski is as well, Jesse, which means that we might be seeing just a tire struggle from him, and maybe he needs to wait until the clear conditions here. They're going to be coming up in about 5 minutes or so. It is still sprinkling out. It is damp. It would not surprise me if we're seeing the greasy conditions come up here very, very soon, as the rain should end very, very quickly. And that is going to dry up this circuit quick, and they're going to have to come in for those dry tires. And, of course, as you said, it's those pit stops, right? So often 2 seconds in the pit stop, 3 seconds in the pit stop, even a second in the pit stop can decide a race. At this point, if Boothby has a second slower pit stop than Malinowski, and Malinowski gets out on drives with good pressures before him, that just throws him back into the attacking box for the rest of the 30 minutes, right? And that is not the position you want to be in if you're in that 41 side Max McLaren. But in the end, we can see this is what's going to cost Malinowski. So he is diving into the wet line a bit, is Boothby. But look at this. Even with the little bit of a slipstream, no chance of Malinowski even touching him.
Well, Tom Bryant, who is a steward for us here at RCI, was in the chat earlier saying that, well, it's going to be a busy day for us, it looks like. And, well, Jake Boswell confirming the damage as we are continuing to get penalties into the box here. Drive-through for car number 3 for hitting the 114 into other cars, that on lap 1. So instead of a time penalty, that is upgraded to a drive-through. And also on lap 1, a stop-go 10 for car 28 for braking too late and taking out the 148 and the 2. So very harsh penalties at the start of this race here. Stop-go, and this is the 114 and the 3. This is what we're talking about. And yes, indeed. That's what the drive-through was for, ladies and gentlemen.
The 3 was that white Bentley in the middle, by the way, for reference.
Yes, indeed. So 2 stop-go 10s and a drive-through given so far in this race. For lap 1 penalties, of course, lap 1 penalties always garner a bigger penalty. But I got to say, it was incredible to see... Oh, yes, and there it is. And there it is one more time for you. But it's incredible to see some of the recoveries that have already occurred. But it's a shame, though. It did take out a few good cars.
It did. I'm very sad to see James Parker, of course, get punted out. I mean, I thought that we were going to have just a fantastic fight between him and Boothby for the points lead. And, of course, you know, not to say that something can't happen to Boothby in the last 4 races, but that is 2 zeros on the board for James Parker. Of course, he can use one of these as a drop round, so he'll have at least one of those striked off the record. But, you know, the question being, how many bad rounds will Boothby have? Because so far, P1, P1, P5, and halfway through this race, well, he's still sitting in P1 with maybe a chance at P2, but in the end, you know, that's probably about it for the moment. That said, you know, of course, if the pit stops do go awry, we're seeing somebody dive into the pit lane a little bit early here. One of the Porsches, I believe that's a Porsche Rombach, and it is. He's going to dive into the pit lane early, Jesse Lee. I'm curious to see if we're going to see some Pirelli stickers on the side of those tires as he makes his way out of the pit lane. That is a very early pit, but we can see damage on there, and I'm wondering if he's forced into the pit lane by nature of the damage rather than his desire to come in and pit this early, as this would be a very early pit. The other part of the problem, of course, is those guys who got the damage early on, 2 pit stops in this race because they're going to have to come in and pit for tires at some point, unless they're going to run on wets for the remainder of it. But that'd be a bit of a struggle. I think it'd be quicker to come in and pit.
Yes, indeed. Mike Jones, if I am correct, I think Rombach is the first one that came in on his own free will. Of course, we saw earlier Rombach involved in that incident that gave him that nose damage. So I think that that was on time for him. But I also think that everybody else now may be paying attention to Rombach if you can. If you have a friend that is spotting or calling the race for you, some of these drivers will. They'll be looking at him and comparing his times with the rest of the field to see just when it is time to come in. And I don't think we're there yet, but I think Rombach just volunteered himself to be the guinea pig for everybody
And he is on dries.
else. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, there it is. I'm looking at him right now on our replay machine. So, yep, yellow Pirelli stickers alongside that tire. So let's stay with him for a lap here and see what happens. I mean, obviously, he's definitely going to struggle in the damp with the dry tires. Let's see. How long was his pit stop? 1:26 into out. Ooh, difficult on the brakes there as well. So I definitely think that he did end up having to repair some damage as well, as we kind of saw as he came in, Jesse. But at this point, look at how much time he's losing as well, having to let the leaders by there. That is very difficult for him. And of course, his tires won't be up to pressure yet. But in the end, you can see just how much of a struggle he's having, both on the brakes as well as the understeer coming out of the corners with the dry tires on. And he's definitely the guinea pig, and I think he's a couple laps short of it. Unfortunately, if he's got to come in for damage, you got to come in for damage and do what you can. Try and mitigate out mitigate out as much as you can. How much time loss you're getting, as he's again having to brake deep because getting blue flagged from the white Bentley there. That's not the Bentley of Dornelis. I'm not sure which Bentley that is. That might be Roth. It's Sunstrom. Okay, I forget. Wow, Sunstrom in a white Bentley. Sunstrom isn't a white Bentley. Jesse Lee, I don't think I've ever seen Sunstrom in a white car before. Definitely a little bit of an odd one, but in the end, Sunstrom doing pretty decently after the contact earlier on in the race. He's made himself up in a P12, trying to chase down that top 10. And we know how consistent he can be. So if he can come in and make his pit stop at the right time, he should still be okay. And getting up maybe into the top 10. He didn't have a massive contact like a couple of the other drivers did. But in the end, it's something that he still struggled through the first part of the race and probably has a little bit of damage on the rear end of that Bentley from that contact. Here is Hamza Bellassane for the H3 Racing Team, of course, teammate to Massoud up in P3 at the moment. He's fighting Juan Zemes out behind and Thomas out ahead. That Aston Martin has done reasonably through this little pack, as we talked about 15-20 minutes ago. Reasonably impressed by him. He is our number one front engine car in the race at the moment, is Romain Thomas in the 42. Bellassane just trying to catch up with him and get on past before the pit window does open. The rain should end here within the next minute or two. Cody Pry going to look on the inside of Bouquet, trying to stay on that wet line as much as possible, cool down the tires for that 33 Porsche, but isn't able to make the move on Bouquet yet. And Honzik, by the way, I've noticed has definitely stepped out a bit from these guys. There's a bit of a gap there, and he's made himself a little bit of a buffer, at least for these guys as they get into their pit window. Temperature hasn't changed, though. 19°C ambient, 23 on the track. So everybody should hopefully have good tire pressures lined up for their pit stops. And that should open up here within the next couple minutes.
Yeah, you definitely would hope that, as I'm surprised, by the way, Malinowski has not fallen off the back of Boothby, which I don't know why I'm surprised about that. They were less than a second apart for the first 30 minutes of this race. I don't know why I expected Boothby when he got around. I guess it was the confident way that Boothby passed Malinowski that made me think that he was going to drive away. But alas, that hasn't happened. And Massoud, who was more than 3 seconds behind the top two, well, all that did was draw him back in. He's about 1.5 off of the back of Malinowski, and they have been that way for many laps indeed, as the rain has officially stopped here in Barcelona. and it is a drier condition indeed. Track damp will undoubtedly go to greasy here sometime soon. And like Mike Jones said, it is right around that time where you would consider coming into the pit lane. Drive through for one other car for causing contact. And this is going to be a knowing the rules moment. 5-second penalty for car 115 for taking out the 899 of Sunstrom. It's noted that the 115 returned the position after that, so that's why it was only a 5-second penalty. So, in addition to all of that, pit stops will be starting at some point. And here is another replay of that chaotic start and the 115 and the contact you saw there. I don't think that was the contact that gave him the penalty because the corner number was a little bit later into the track. But that was some contact from the 115 early into the race, and that certainly was what set up the later contact. Steve Favre in the SDL Esport team there. And here is Mikhail Sunstrom, who has rebounded nicely from being spun. I think Mike Jones was talking a bit about that a moment ago. 12th place, nothing to shake a stick at here, as one of our first leaders is in. Grady is in the 418, going to be one of the first takers on the pit lane, undoubtedly going to be fitting dry tires on to that Bentley.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody who comes in and pits at this point is definitely putting dry tires on. Grady definitely going to be the first of the more reasonable pit stops here. With the weather now officially ended. Of course, we saw Rombach take that early pit because of some damage, and I do indeed see some Pirelli stickers on Grady's tires. He gets dropped off his jacks. That is going to be our first, our second, I guess, now car out on the dry tires. And it is going to tick over here to greasy very soon, I would imagine. And I'm going to say we get another lap and a half or so on these damp conditions. Grady making his way out of the pit lane now. I'm very curious to see how he kind of does through the remainder of the next, let's say, 10 minutes or so before all of the pit stops kind of shake themselves out. Most of the time, what I see from these guys, Jesse, is, of course, they like to pit as late as possible, no matter what, right? So these guys are going to push these wet tires as long as they possibly can before they have to come in and pit. I'm looking at Jardier, for example, Jaroslav Honzik, and his tires. He is severely overpressured at this point, and his left side tires are getting a little orange in temperature, which means that they're definitely getting a little spicy as the temperature just ticked up a degree out on the track now that it's starting to stop the rain. And he is still out on the track in his Ferrari up in P5. He has gapped Bouquet by almost 2 seconds now at this point. So he's holding his car on so far. And I'm curious to see when they come in and pit. I think it's going to be as late as possible. I'm going to say we see everybody that's in the top 10 right now. I think that they're going to pit around the 15-minute mark. I think it's about when they come in.
Mike Jones, I've been doing the maths.
Go on.
You know how ACC has that incredibly long cycle on the wet tires, even when the track is completely dry?
Sure.
What if the rain lasted a little bit too long and they tough it out for 10 minutes on a wet tire on a dry racetrack like we saw them do at Monza about a month or so ago? What if they come in just fuel and go and do not take the tires? At least these top teams. Now, in the middle of the pack, you don't have anything to lose.
Interesting.
But Malinowski does. Does Malinowski, do they do some crazy strategy here to try and beat Boothby? I think somebody, and I'm not saying any particular driver, I think somebody might try to do it, as it's now gone greasy, the track. But that's still, we are told by ACC professionals that wet tires are still okay in this case. It's not like they burn the rubber off. They just get really hot and they're not sticky at all, but they don't burn off like you would expect a wet tire to do in the dry. Somebody might try to tough this out.
So you're going to lose 27 extra seconds in the pit to change your tires, right? Let's estimate out. So we're doing minute 45 laps in the dry, probably, with the wet tires on. Let's say, and maybe minute 43s with dry tires. 10 laps, 2 seconds a lap. You do the math, Jesse. That's still 7 seconds a gain.
You're correct. I am doing the maths, and I can say I've got a couple of pros telling me that, yeah, this is what I would do. I just wouldn't put tires on the car if you've gotten this far. It is possible. I don't know how happy the car is going to be here, especially here in the last 5 minutes, but it might not matter. But if you're chasing a position, if you're chasing a win, I don't know what George Boothby does. If Boothby doesn't change tires, that's going to be interesting. I think Malinowski is the most likely to not do as much, or perhaps Massoud or Deckers, for instance. I don't know if Boothby would be the one to take that gamble and stay out there, but perhaps he would be. I'm doing a lot of double talk here, but perhaps he would be, considering he has the least
Pride.
amount to lose. But Cody Pride's in.
Hart.
What is Cody Pride thinking about doing here? Let's watch the sidewalls, folks, on the tires. They can tell you a lot about what they're doing.
That,
of course,
and also
rain
just
tires,
how long the pit stop is.
well, that as well. But yes, of course, rain tires do not have lettering on the sidewalls of the tires. The dry tires do have branding. So it's going to be interesting. Also, like Mike Jones
Cody's
said,
still in the pit. He's
time
still
of the
there.
stop. So that's tires. He's taking tires. A 33 of Cody Pride from the Porsche factory is taking tires. We assume they're
so are Mark
dry
Farton, Bella's saying. They're still up on their jacks. So all three of these guys are taking tires.
I think all that does is make it more enticing for somebody in the top 10 to not follow conventional wisdom here. I think somebody will do it. It's going to be interesting. Pay attention here as Dordel's gets past there by a car on a different lap than they are.
While you were talking, by the way, Mr. Boswell migrated himself into our booth and handed me a slip of paper for Mr. Herbenow, receiving a 15-second penalty. So in the end, that's something that is going to be from, let's see, lap 4, actually, from them. So Stewart's still catching up from early on in the race. Herbenow caught a bit of the back end of the 195, sent him flying around. That was that contact with Piffet, of course, that went deep into the corner of the chicane. I thought that was maybe the Ferrari, but apparently the stewards have decided that was fault of the Mercedes coming into the back end of that track. So we're going to see this one more time here. Let's see.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It looks like so. So yeah, they're gonna throw that around for the back end of Herbenow there. Curious to look at that one after the race again, because I want to watch that one a little closer from a couple angles. But Piffet again, just not the best race for him. This is looking very much like a drop round for him. He had of course, the stop-go 10 for causing initial contact that sent both John McCauley spiraling towards the back of the field, as well as James Parker completely out of the race. That's going to be a rough race from him after the great finishes he's had towards the top. Mikhail Sunstrom in the pit lane as well. I'm looking at him sitting in the pit lane for quite a while here, Jesse. I think Sundstrom's taking tires as well. So they're just, someone's going to do it. And at this point, the longer it goes on, the more likely it is that more and more people are going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Strangely enough, our broadcaster Stewie's the one that's been doing the maths, and he says that it's only about half a second faster on the slick tires as opposed to the wets. And in his experience with a Porsche, that you can cool the tires off, or if you can cool the tires off, it's not the worst decision. I'm being told by Stewie that I'm misrepresenting what he said, so I'm going to go back and reread it.
I think basically what he's saying is that so far with the track conditions improving, they've only improved about a half second a lap, give or take. So
Yes.
overall, their overall lap times haven't improved a ton. It's not necessarily versus the wet to dry tires. I am curious. I mean, let's take a look at Martin Grady's last lap, 148.5. George Boothby's last lap, 148.9.
Yeah, it's
So
just that's ACC in a nutshell with these Pirelli wet tires. These wet Pirellis do not wear out. The way that we think of a wet tire, especially in endurance competition, as a wet tire, usually whenever it gets too warm, it chews itself apart, and that is the limit of the wet tire. These Pirelli wets do not do that. They get really hot and you have no traction, but they don't rip themselves apart to the point where you physically cannot drive on them. That's what you're seeing here, and you're able to drive these Pirellis into the ground, essentially, as hot as you like them. And that's what this may turn into, is 15 minutes, and every minute that goes by where the track is still in a greasy condition, where it doesn't pick up rubber, where it isn't picking up heat, is helping people like Boothby and Malinowski make their decision. By the way, Massoud for H3 Racing all over the back of an ailing Malinowski. And I think it's clear here that Malinowski's tire pressures, something with the car. Stewie mentioned earlier that he reckoned that the wing on Malinowski's car was a little higher than some others as well. But whatever the case may be, Massoud is very much on the back of him now for second place. And even if Malinowski does fall to third here, I feel like it's still got to be mission accomplished for the day. But you got to be very careful here. And you don't want to get into a free fall. Alban Bouquet coming into the pit lane. Dealer's choice, Mike Jones. What's he going to do?
Who, 14 minutes left, man. I don't think any of the top six are going to take tires. I do think that is indeed the play. I mean, only 14 minutes left. That is just, there's no point in properly taking tires at that point, unless you just feel like you have absolutely zero grip left and you're going to be losing even more time than you would be losing swapping the tires, right? So I'm watching Bouquet in the pit lane, and he is still up on his jacks, so he's taking tires. So they're just trying to prove me wrong. But the longer this goes on, the less chance of these guys actually taking the tires, you know what I mean? So Bouquet, in the end, he's going to go ahead and put on the dries and see what happens.
Well, Alban Bouquet going with the conventional wisdom there, taking the tires. I think you're going to see a lot more people taking tires as opposed to not taking tires, but all things considered, I feel like a lot of the top five are going to try and protect their positions and, well, go against the conventional wisdom. So it is this, and this is looking good for George Boothby up front. He's only a half a second slower than he was in the wet, or a half a second off of where he was in the wet, rather. So there is virtually not a big difference there, and that's good news for him, bad news for everybody else. Malinowski, though, under fire from Massoud, but from behind in that silver and orange car. Meanwhile, I think you might be about to see what dry tires can do, as the car in the background there very clearly has some fresh rubber underneath them. But be respectful to this point.
Interesting. I wonder if he's got fresh rubber and maybe messed up his tire pressures a bit, because he's way off the track there, perhaps on trying to find some wet and dampness out on the side of the track. Either that, or he's just trying to slow himself down, realizing these are leaders out in front of him. Honzik in the pit. And, well, that is a tire stop for him as well, because he's been up on his jacks for 10, 15 seconds so far. So Honzik going to go ahead and take those tires. Deckers also out in the pit ahead of him, also making the tire stop. And, Jesse, I think it is getting more and more likely that Massoud and Boothby might be the only ones who go for the fuel-only stop. I I think that Malinowski might realize at this point that his tires are so bad that he's not going to be able to not take tires, because he's probably going to lose this position and miss out here within the next lap or two, especially
Oh,
if
sideways
he
is
keeps,
Malinowski there.
especially
Oh,
if he keeps up like this.
Oh,
Given that everybody behind him is taking tires, I think Malinowski's best thing to do is to take tires at this point, because I don't think he can hold on for the rest of this year. And there he comes into the pit. We're going to find out.
well,
Boothby's into the pit ahead of him as well.
So Boothby into the pit lane, Malinowski coming to the lane as well. And that will promote the number 100 Porsche of Massoud into the lead of this race. Third lead change today. George Boothby in, and the $1 million question is, what does George Boothby do? And Malinowski is in as well. They're
tires,
all taking tires. Both of them.
Nope, Malinowski's released. Malinowski is released.
Malinowski didn't.
On the wets. Boothby.
Now
Boothby's taking dries.
Now this is exactly what I said.
Wow.
How interesting would it be if Boothby
I can't believe it. Boothby took dries.
didn't roll the dice, but Malinowski did, knowing that he didn't really have anything to lose. Boothby has everything to lose, so he has to protect, but Malinowski doesn't really. Malinowski's in the middle of this championship right now, and he's chasing 2 wins in a row. So Malinowski out without taking tires, gonna gamble, pitting out of the second place position under threat from third. This is going to have huge implications.
He's been so slow on these tires. This is the absolute hugest risk for him, because at this point we can see right now, if you switch over to Malinowski real quick, Stewie, up in P2, what we can see is he's got lap traffic fighting around him, and he is slower than these guys. So he has the blue flag, advantage versus these cars. But the problem is that if he holds up these cars this much, he might get a penalty for it. Because in the end, he is the slower car in this place. He should not be defending. And he's currently defending against this Lexus. If I was this Lexus, I'd be filing a stewarding report against him, possibly, because he's now, struggling against the Porsche, to catch back up to the Porsche ahead, because Malinowski is in the way and so slow on these tires. That is going to really hold Malinowski up, and if he gets a penalty at some point as well, that's really going to cost him. That Lexus has now lost almost 2 seconds or so, if I'm not mistaken, and that is just showing how slow Malinowski is out on these tires. So Boothby 17 seconds behind him at the moment. 8 minutes to go. I think he's potentially got the legs to catch up to him if Malinowski stays this slow.
Well, I've been doing the maths.
Oh, well, before you get to that, we've got some contact here. Major contact. Giner throws it down the inside of the Porsche. The Porsche throws it on the inside of the Bentley, gets him knocked over, and then cuts back across and catches him again. And that is going to be the Porsche.
No. That is a massive penalty. That's going to be a massive penalty. We may not see that play out live here on RCI TV, but that is going to be a colossal talking to by the stewarding staff. But like I was going to say, I've been doing the math here, and I think Massoud, if he chooses to not put tires on, he might have a chance to win this race. Otherwise, what you're going to see is Malinowski blocking for his life over George Boothby, and that's just as exciting. Either way, we are going to get treated to a fantastic finish. Look at that
4.5 seconds. 4.5 seconds
absolutely hemorrhaging time is Malinowski. Malinowski, I hope that you got some really good training in today. Look at that, the seesaw of the wheel. That is not how you're supposed to drive a GT3. That is called sawing at the wheel, and it is obvious that he is struggling with that car, but it doesn't matter.
2
he
seconds
has a
again.
chance
Second
to win
and a half
this
already.
race. Absolutely incredible stuff. 6 minutes, 37 to go. 9 seconds the gap between him and George Boothby. And what will our leader Massoud do?
I don't know. I'm watching him on my replay monitor. I've got him just permanently up on my screen at this point, waiting for him to come to the pit lane. He's obviously not going to take tires at this point. He'd be silly to take tires. He's going to wait until the last possible second, come into the pit lane and splash and dash. So I'm pretty sure at this point Masoud's got this victory because he's so far ahead due to the tire stop that Boothby made, right? Malinowski obviously still hemorrhaging times. Stewie just alerting us that it was a 7-second gain on the lap last time around between Boothby and Malinowski. And here's what the problem is, Jesse Lee. If Boothby catches him before the last lap, right? If Boothby has at least one lap to go and they come out of Sector 3 at the same time, it isn't going to matter how fast Malinowski can be because Boothby's going to drive past him on the straight the same we saw last time, right? Masoud is very much struggling as well. By the way, I'm watching him. I don't know if he maybe just got a tap from the Bentley behind him or not, but he's very much struggling as well up at the front. And, you know, he's actually going to come into the pit lane this time by. So I'm going to keep an eye on him and see what he does here momentarily. We're going to find out, but Boothby still reeling in Malinowski.
George Boothby playing the Jaws theme
3-1
song here at this point because he can see him now. It was 17 to 19 seconds. It's now down to 6, and he can see him. He can see him, and I don't think this is going to be much of a fight. Malinowski, if you have any amazing defensive moves in you, now would be the time to show them, but I just don't think that there's going to be much in it. You can see it. The gap is gone. The tires are gone on Malinowski's car.
Masoud did not take tires. He's coming out of the pit now.
Masoud did not take tires, but here is the fight. This is all a fight for the lead.
Wait a minute.
And
this
here
is
goes
interesting.
George Boothby
Hang on
down
a
to the
second.
inside.
Masoud isn't out of the pit lane yet. He just released his pit limiter. Look at how close they are.
It's not going to matter, I don't think.
Never mind. They're not even close. He's gone.
And now Malinowski just gets back in front. So a net nothing gained, nothing lost between the two. But contact between Masoud and Malinowski. Meanwhile, George Boothby looking for win number 3 is gone.
George Boothby has got this in the bag at this point. There is going to be nothing that can stop him from staying out ahead of these Porsches unless he has an incident. And both of these Porsches are struggling. Look at the wheel of Masoud there in the H3 racing car. He is struggling just as much as Malinowski is. This is going to be the fight of drift cars at this point, more or less. Masoud and Malinowski going to fight down to the absolute limit. Wet tires absolutely boiling out here on this dry track. Desperately trying to fight for that second step of the podium. Masoud, big slide there from them, and you can see Pride in the background as well. He might also catch up here, Jesse Lee, and because he is a reminder, Pride is another one of those cars that's on dries. He's now less than 2 seconds behind them, and he's going to catch them very quickly. He's got 3 minutes. He's got so much time. Unless these guys stack up side by side and form a moving chicane, Pride is going to be gone coming out of the final corner.
And Masoud are fighting for third. Let's be completely real here. Completely sideways. A dive down the inside is Cody Pride. It's done. Gonna cut the track is Masoud. It won't matter. And then 1 to go for second place in Cody Pride as he's gonna get him right here. Just the drive off the corner. He's got grip in the tires. Malinowski doesn't, and all of a sudden, Malinowski.
Bouquet is there too. So is Honzik.
Malinowski goes from first down to third, but how bad could it be as everybody coming around Masoud and almost contact between Jardier and Masoud, but it doesn't come to it, and close enough, close as you like here. And here comes Albin Bouquet and Jardier around the outside. It's going to be 3 wide off the corner. Can Jardier somehow stick it in there? And Masoud in the background's off.
Yeah, Masoud finally ejects himself off the circuit. We can see how much him and Malinowski have been struggling so bad with grip. We see Deckers in the background get past Malinowski as well. Bouquet and Jardier still side by side. coming into turn number 5. We're going to see what happens. Jardier looking to the left side, not able to get the nose under out into turn 6. And will he be able to get the run down the straight? That Ferrari has been so strong today in the slipstream. Bouquet has no slipstream out ahead as they come back out on the back straight. Jardier probably is going to make a move here coming into turn 10. He's going to have to stick to the outside though, but that does leave him for the cutback opportunity, and that's what he's going to do. He cuts back, gets the nose under. He's going to have the inside line for the next turn. Easy on the bumps, and there it is. There's the contact. Bouquet makes the contact, saves. Jardier does in that. Now Decker's all over the back of Bouquet. An amazing save from Jardier. Bit of a replay from here. Here's the onboard cam from Jardier over the curb. Tries to cut back across. Doesn't realize Bouquet is already there. Slides himself on those new dry tires that he has. That early grip really lending him for that. Decker's all over the back of Bouquet. Back to live pictures here. Jardier is gone. Leader is on the last lap at this point. Bouquet chasing or ahead of Decker's just ever so slightly. And if we look further back the field here, Malinowski still hemorrhaging positions. Back to P8, back to P9 here in just a second as Sunstrom comes across his right side down into Elf Corner. We can see Massoud all the way down to P14 after his incident. Jesse Lee, Boothby is absolutely gone at this point. Pride ahead of Honzik by about a second and a half. It's going to come down to Deckers and Bouquet, I think, at the line here.
Mark Vart also continuing to have issues with the tires here in the late going, but I just want to go back to Jardier. I want to speak directly to Jards. What in the world was that save? An excellent save that you made right there, and it is your reward being third place for the time being. But is there anything left in the tank to catch Cody Pride? I don't know, but what a massive shakeup it is. Malinowski back down to 9th. He will likely finish there. Albin Bouquet, what happens here? Overtake in a very tight spot, a little bit of a touch, and pass made one way or another, and it's coming down to it. What a crazy race, but for George Boothby, it has been a masterful drive. Qualified on pole, lost the lead, never panicked. 20 minutes in the race, retook the lead in grand fashion, and playing the safe strategy was the right call today. George Boothby wins number 3 on the season in race number 4, the clear favorite for the championship. Cody Pride comes home second. Jardier right behind will finish a brilliant third. Decker's a fantastic fourth. Bouquet fifth. Mark Vart in 6th. Thomas 7th. Sunstrom coming to the line. It's going to be a bit of a drag race. Sunstrom 8th. Belisay 9th. Malinowski falls all the way back to 10th place after leading 5 minutes ago. Grady 11th. Vanborough, Kovacs, Juan Zimis, Massoud 15th. Lawrence, Sons, Mironov, Dorsch, Jiner, Roth, Herbanow, Waz, Fav, Kalat, Samard, Piffet, and the list goes on. What an insane race. It was like a cork in the bottle, and right at the end, the cork came out, and it was absolute craziness.
Craziness about sums up that finish. That was absolutely insane at the end. The pit strategies really playing themselves out. I'm Jesse. They're just trying to prove you wrong. And look at this. The last couple cars are not the last couple cars, but all the actually, never mind. The last couple cars that are coming across the line are still nose to tail, whether they're in P27 or not. And every single fight coming up, back and down the field, went down to the last lap. Fabian Piffet comes across the line in P26, and in the end, a struggle of a race for Piffet, but such a fantastic finish by the top 10 overall. Malinowski and Massoud unfortunately went for the gamble and did not come across the victors of that one. And Jesse, I think we might have some of our drivers stacking up in the requester booth if we can get Stewie to potentially pick up their audio here in just a moment.
Yes, indeed. And while he does that, keep in mind I can't talk on the other thing. So handle this for me.
Well, we are joined by there's Cody, George Boothby, and Cody Pride. I'm trying to get Jardier in here as well, though he's ignoring me. How rude of him. So Boothby and Cody, you guys went for the tire strap strategy late into the race here. George, you obviously ended up taking the victory off of that. How'd that go?
Yeah, that was a wild race. I mean, I didn't expect to do that well in the wet with the McLaren because it's not the best wet weather car, but I just sort of hacked together a setup that worked quite nice. And yeah, it was just funny when I saw that it was going to dry out, and then obviously the the big thing on everyone's in everyone's head is, when do I pit or do I pit for tires? So I thought I'd just wait and see what other dry runners would do. Let them be the guinea pig. And I saw on the Delta that someone went way quicker. So I was like, right, pit, tires, let's go. Because I just knew the wet's going to get worse and worse and worse. So, yeah, unlucky for some people who stayed on wet.
So Malinowski and Massoud in their Porsches were the ones that did not take tires. So Cody, you obviously made the option of taking tires, and that paid off for you. So why do you think that the other two Porsches decided not to, and yet now you're in here? Speaking of which, here's Malinowski. So Cody, you decided to take the tires, Malinowski and them didn't. That paid off for you? I mean, do you think that was, well, obviously it was the right decision, but what played into that for you as opposed to not taking tires?
I think it was me pitting like on the edge of it, going from greasy to like green or fast track. So on my out lap, the tires were really cold, but then I managed to just get them in temperature, and I did like a second faster lap than I did before, which was really good. And then I managed to get Alban and Jardier, but obviously I was on like 4-lap older tires, so they were really grained.
Jardier, the absolute. I think Jardier. I don't think I've ever heard Jesse Lee scream that much before when you saved that car. He's good. I can still hear him. Jardier, did you hear Jesse?
Yes, I heard Jesse. Yes.
Go ahead. So yeah, he was screaming that entire time you saved that car. So like, an amazing hold by you, man. I mean, don't take me wrong. It was an aggressive move, but I think it was a very fair one.
Yeah, that's basically what my chat is saying as well. Like, I was actually expecting, like, because usually it's always my fault, you know, when my chat always tells me. So I was actually surprised that 99% of the people are saying that I did nothing wrong. So I have been in a situation of bouquet so many times. So I think in that speed difference, you have to back out, you know. But I really enjoyed the fight. I can't believe the last 3 laps were so crazy, you know. Like, I had a race on Wednesday, exactly same weather on Spa, and I did a mistake with the strategy and so on. So today I tried to save it, and I was way too safe. Like, everybody was screaming at me that I should pit like 2 laps ago, and I pitted 2 laps later than I was supposed to, you know. And that's why I lost to Cody, I think, because he pitted like 3 laps earlier. And yeah, I'm super happy. It was super crazy, like unbelievable.
Well, Boothby, you made the late pit. It was lap 26 for you. Jardier was lap 25, and Cody was lap 21. So,
yeah, track position was, it was reeling me in. It was saying, "Go on, stay out. It's okay. They won't be able to pass you." But no, it got to the point where it was like I was driving on skates. It was just pointless.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of driving on skates, Malinowski,
no, you can't do it like that.
That's such a fail.
Talk us through it, Torch. Talk us through it. What happened?
It's weird because right after George overtook me, I was already thinking about the strategy, and I was actually thinking about pitting on slicks rather early. But because of that Spa race that Jardier was talking about, and in that race I pitted way too early, and pretty much everyone pitted way too early. So
I think we just lost Malinowski
Hey,
for
Might have changed internet.
Yeah,
Come on.
classic.
to his internet normal.
The I'm about to disconnect team has
Yeah.
disconnected. Can I just
Well,
say, Cody, George, Jardier, you are all insane. Congratulations on the podium. Well done indeed. And some of the best driving I've seen in a long time. Boothby around the outside of multiple people. Jardier mixing it up, going 3 wide, getting spun and still managing to run a decent lap time and stay in front. Brilliant stuff. Cody coming up through the field, zigzagging. Congratulations, guys. Good job.
Thank you
Thank
guys.
you.
GG for George and Cody.
Yeah, good job. Good
Yeah,
job.
good job. Well done.
Well, Jody, you've got to come back and defend your title. You got 4 more races to fight back against Boothby. However, he's got 3 wins here out of 4 with a P5 finish, of course, in round 3. I think it's going to be a struggle to fight, especially after the DNF from James Parker this week, George. So, I think it's going to be a fantastic last 4 rounds. 2 hours is older, of course, next week, and we're going to figure out how that one sorts itself out. Because George, you can't choke at this point.
I'll find a way. I'll find a way.
My internet just died. Lol.
Can confirm.
What do you know? Good timing on your part, as we should be during the race.
It's second Friday championship race in a row. After like
At least it happened after the race.
5 minutes after the race. What? Why?
Well, all right, guys. Hey, good luck for the remainder of the season. Thanks for coming in and chatting for a few minutes. And again, we'll see you next week at Zolder for the 2 hours there.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
so
Thank you.
much, guys. Thank you.
Absolutely a
Thanks,
pleasure. And,
bye.
of course, everybody, what a great
All right, Jesse, I think I cut off your microphone there briefly. Go ahead.
what I was going to say before our broadcaster removed me from the box. This is. Oh, that was Mike Jones. I do apologize to Stewie. After my producer, Mike Jones, removed me from the box. I was going to say, what a crazy race. What a fantastic finish. And, well, luckily, that was only race 4 of 8. We got 4 more of them to go, Mike, and the 2 hour of Zolder next week.
Yeah, the 2 hours older, of course, next week, our single endurance race during this Friday championship. 2 pit stops are going to be required for that one, both fuel stops for that. So no tires are required, though, of course, I would expect the guys to take tires throughout the race at least once. And in the end, it's going to be interesting to watch that. It's 2 hours at Zolder. Who can survive the list of chicanes that happen at Zolder will be the question. I think it's going to be a fantastic race. We'll see if Boothby can come back and catch this one once again for win number 4, and if perhaps James Parker can redeem himself, as he's been a bit of a struggle here through the first part of the season now after the DNF today. No fault of his own really today. Joe McCauley taken out by stewards determining that being Fabian Piffett who caused the incident, which took out Joe McCauley and subsequently spearheaded him into James Parker after 2 P2 finishes in round 1 and 2. Well, big shout out to all of our partners, AK Informatica, of course, for providing our servers alongside of Race Department and Raceface Speed Labs, as well as Driver 61, and everybody that helps us out, the head stewarding team, Tom Bryant, Jake Boswell out here, and the rest of the stewards, and everybody else that supports us out here in the community. We much appreciate you, and we'll have an announcement coming on Monday. By the way, no race on Monday. We'll have Night Owl tomorrow, of course, but no race on Monday. But keep an eye on the Discord. There's a big announcement coming out that I'll be posting sometime in the morning. In the meantime, from me, Mike Jones, from Stewie, our broadcaster, and from Jesse Lee, have a fantastic rest of your day. Jesse and Ryan Mawson will join you tomorrow for Night Owl.